Hey friends, what's up? In the previous video we made a screen recorder using just browser APIs and Svelte, which you can check out if you want. So we get these beautiful WebM videos, but unfortunately the reality is that a lot of things like social media prefer MP4 videos, so that's really inconvenient for the user to have to convert those files, which you can simply do. If you're familiar with FFmpeg, it's really an awesome utility. So you can say FFmpeg-I and then you can give it the video, so video WebM, and the output you want, and it should be done in a second. So this is really awesome, but it's really not a great user experience to demand from them to have FFmpeg on their system, right, and to do this. But we can use FFmpeg in the browser thanks to WebAssembly. So today we're going to make a video converter using FFmpeg in the browser and Svelte. So let me show you how cool this is. So I can just drag over this file and we get this drop zone. So now we have this cool transition. Alright, so the video is done, so we can save it, let's replace it, and that's how simple that is. Alright friends, but before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support me by becoming a patron. Alright friends, so let's start from scratch, and if you want to follow along, you can go to your terminal, and you can just type npm create svelte, and this is going to scaffold a sveltekit project. And you can use npm or pnpm, doesn't matter. In this case, I'm just using pnpm, so I'm going to do that. And here I just have some defaults in this project, so inside of this layout I'm just importing some styles, which is just a regular reset. Here I just have some global CSS variables and some default values, so you can just copy this over in a couple of seconds if you want. But yeah, that's basically it. So let's get started. Alright, so first let's create a script tag and then let's define a state. So this is optional if you're not using TypeScript. So let's think about all the possible states of our app. So first we want to start in the loading state because we need to load the FFmpeg binary. So when that is done, we can say that it's loaded, so our user can drop the video right now. And then let's, for the conversion, say convert start, so we know when we start the conversion. And then in case of an error, maybe we can say convert error, and then when it's done, we can say convert done. So now let's define the state of our app. So we can say let state, and then by default is going to be loading. And then I'm also going to add an error state, which is going to be empty. So whenever we have an error, we can show it to the user. So we're going to need a reference to FFmpeg. So I'm going to say FFmpeg, and this is going to be just of type FFmpeg. And then we're also going to track the progress of the conversion. So we can just say let progress, but we're going to use a Svelte tween store so we can animate the value over time, which is going to be really cool. So I can just start typing tween, and this is going to be imported from svelte/motion. And then we can give it a default value of 0. Alright, so next let's work on the markup. I'm going to add a title h1, and then I'm going to say WebM to MP4 converter. And now if I save this, we're going to see we get our title here. So now let's specify the drop zone, and that's really simple. So let's first create a div, and now inside of here, first I'm going to say on drop, and now we can use this pipe symbol and we can say prevent default. So this is really a nifty shorthand in Svelte. And then we're going to create a function handle drop, and we need to do the same for the drag over event. But in this case, I'm just going to say prevent default. And then I'm going to give it an empty function, so I don't have to create it. Prevent default in this case is going to prevent the default browser behavior, which is when you drag a video or a media file inside your browser, it's going to try to open it, right? So that's the default behavior. And let me just create this function here. It doesn't complain. We can say handle drop. And now as you can see, if we hover over it, it's complaining about some ESLint rule, which I really don't care about right now. So I can copy that lint rule. I can go here, I can create a HTML comment, and I can say svelte ignore, and I can paste that rule. Another thing I'm going to do is use the data attribute later for styling. So I'm going to say data state, and I'm going to assign a state to it. And lastly, I'm going to give it a class drop. And since we're using explicit state, now inside of our markup, our job can't be any easier. So here I'm going to use this if snippet. So now I'm going to say if state loading. In this case, we can use a p tag, and let's just say loading FFmpeg. And let's also use a Svelte transition. So we can say in, so when the element is created, we can say fade, and this is going to be imported from Svelte. If you look at here, So how cool is that? Let me just move this up so we have fade, and that's how simple that is. Alright, so now we can just copy over these blocks. So that was the loading state. So when everything is loaded, we can say drag video here. So let's go to the next state. Alright, so now if we're converting the video, we can say convert start. So in this case, we can say converting video, and now we can make a nice progress bar. So let me just go here. I can say progress bar. Now we're going to create this div, and let's create another one inside, which is progress. So here is something really cool that we can do. So since we're using a tween store, this value is going to get animated over time, right? So now we can just pass a CSS variable to animate the width of this element. So we can use the percentage for that. And we can use this shortcut. You can use this attribute, you can do it inside, but Svelte has this neat shortcut, style, colon, and then we can say progress. So this is the name of the CSS variable. And now we can say, let me just do it like this. We can say progress. This is a store, we have to use $sign, and then we can just use the % sign. And then for the store here, we can again use this. We can say progress, and we can say to fix 0 so it doesn't have decimal points, right? And then you can also give it a % at the end. And that's how simple that is, right? And we're going to see how this works in CSS in a bit. And then if, let me use an if block again, I can say if state convert done. And then we can just say, first I'm going to use this confetti library. So I can say div use confetti. So I'm going to show you that in a second, so that we're going to use neo confetti, which is a really simple library. So this is just a svelte action. And then we can give it this p tag. We can say in fade, and then we can say done, and let's just give it an emoji. We can say tada. And if you don't have it installed, you can use npm or npm, whatever. So you can say npm add neo confetti svelte. So you can just install that, and that's how simple that is. And then you can just go here to the top, and you can say import confetti from neo confetti svelte, and that's how simple that is. And I think that's it for the state, and now we just need to log an error if it exists. So we can say if error, and then let's just log it out. Use a p tag, and we can say error. So we're going to give it also a class error, and let's say also in fade. Also, so now we can save this, and the only thing I'm going to do, I'm going to copy over the style so I don't have to type in here for half an hour, right? And there's really nothing special. I'm just centering this title. Here I'm going to define this drop zone, give it a width height, some padding using good old CSS nesting, nothing special here. And here for the progress bar, I have some CSS variables that I'm using, nothing special. So this is just a regular progress bar. So the interesting thing is here that we're going to pass in progress as a CSS variable. So here where we have this progress bar in the progress itself, we're going to set the progress for the width, right? So how awesome is this, right? This is really simple. All right, so now if we save it and preview it in the browser, we're going to see now we have our UI. So now we can move on to the next part. And also let's keep track of the state, right? So that's fun. So we can go to our script here, and let me just scroll up. And I can say $sign console log, so I can console log out the state. And as you can see, the only state we're in is in loading. Alright, so let's implement the drop feature. And of course, I can never spell confetti properly. Alright, first try, let's go. So let's really talk about the drop zone. And for that, I'm going to go to MDN, and of course, all of these links are going to be in the description. So you can read this if you want, and we already done what they told us here. So we added these events, and they now show you how to handle the files. And this might be intimidating if you never used this before, because now we have these two methods that they really don't explain really that well, to be honest. So you have event data transfer items and event data transfer files. And this is something I see often. People have this analysis paralysis. They think they have to always pick the in quotes right thing, but there is really no such thing. Just pick whatever works. And if you do some research, for example, what is the difference between data transfer items and files, you're going to see that it supports things like subdirectories. It's a newer API, but it's really not important. Do you need subdirectories? No, right? And you're going to see, just pick the path of least resistance. So I'm going to show you that in code. What do I mean by that? So let's just go here, and I'm going to say here event is going to be drag event, I think. So now we can console log event data transfer. So now we can just see what we have. This is what you always have to do, just console log out everything. And let me just open this file. So now I can drag this video so I can get the file info. And now we can see, okay, here we have this data transfer thing, right? So now we have files and items. It doesn't look really useful yet. So maybe you go back to your code and then we're going to say items. And now again, we can drag this. Then we can see what we get. We again get this scripted thing, data transfer item. So we have to do more here. And then probably, okay, what if I just pick this older API files? What happens then? Let me just clear this. Drop. All right, and now this immediately gives you what you want. End of the story, right? So pick the path of least resistance, right? Is this going to make your app 10 times worse? I highly doubt it, right? So there is really never a wrong choice you can make unless it's leaking your user's personal information. That is a story for another time, maybe. But yeah, you can just pick this and that's it. So now we can use this without worrying about these things. Let's just also limit this to one file. So I'm going to say if event data transfer files length. So I'm going to say if it's higher than 1, then I'm going to set the error to upload one file. And Tyson is going to complain. So let's go here. I'm going to say event data transfer. So if this doesn't exist, then we're just going to return. All right, so now it's not going to complain anymore. Let's see if our state management works. So I'm just going to copy over this file. Let's create 2. And now when I'm going to drag them, upload one file. Awesome. So now this works. And again, now you can glean more information. So for example, I want to limit this to just be of type WebM. So we already saw that information, right? So that is really simple to do now. So we can say if event data transfer files, so we're going to pick the first one because we always assume in just one file, otherwise it's an error, right? And then we can say type, and we can say video WebM. In this case, we're going to clear any errors that we have, and then we're just going to get the file. So we can say const file event data transfer files, and let's pick the first file. Or you can use array destructuring. So in this case, you can just wrap this file into an array. You can name this whatever you want, by the way. It's not like object destructuring. So you can give this any name you want, like file. And let's see if this works. So now when we console log this out, let me just drag and drop this video. Awesome, that's it. Now you have everything you need to move forwards, right? Always pick the path of least resistance. And then we, of course, need to make sure this error state. So otherwise, else, if the type isn't video WebM, we can set the error to only WebM is supported. That's how simple that is. So maybe if I go here, let me just new document. If I create an empty file, let me just drag this in, only WebM is supported. So you can see even that works. And let me just delete these things so they aren't bothering me. And yeah, that's it. Alright friends, one more thing I want to mention is that you can always gain a deeper understanding of these things. So for example, what the heck is this file type, right? So if you go to these docs here, there is a link somewhere for this, and then you can open it in MDN again, and then it says it here that the file comes from using drop, input, and etc. And then you can literally find out what it means here. A file object is a specific kind of blob. Blob, mysterious, right? You can maybe now go further and investigate what is a blob and can be used in any context that a blob can. And here you have some foreshadowing because it says in particular, file reader url.create object URL. That's interesting. Maybe we're going to see that later, right? But yeah, that's it. That's how you learn about these things. Alright friends, so now that we have our video, let's set up FFmpeg. So we can go to the FFmpeg site, you can go to try it now, and here is a bunch of cool examples, but let's go to their docs and see how to set it up. So we can see getting started, and then we can see installation. So we can do it using npm or pnpm, so you can install FFmpeg/FFmpeg add utils, but there's going to be one catch, and that is that FFmpeg utils won't work for some weird reason, but I'm actually going to show you to not be afraid of looking at a source code of a library. So we're just going to yoink their code and it's going to work as expected. And we're also going to learn something in the process. So actually, let's follow their advice. Inside of my terminal, I'm just going to end everything, and I'm going to use pnpm. I'm going to say pnpm add, and I'm going to say FFmpeg/FFmpeg, and I'm also going to install utils just so I can show you the problem. And yeah, that's basically it. So now let's just start the development server and let's look at their docs more. So you can see here is an example which uses React. And you can see sometimes you don't know how lucky you are. Unless you're already using React, then I feel bad for you. what the heck is this? So they're using useRef here to keep a stable reference to the FFmpeg instance, right? Because this React component constantly re-renders. My question is though, can they just define it outside? But anyhow, that's just a wild tangent. But as you can see, it's really not that bad. So here they initialize FFmpeg, and here they're going to use this base URL because they want to load the core later because it has 10 megabytes or something. So we don't really want to include that as part of our bundle. And we can also see that we can add event listeners, and then we just have to use this FFmpeg load, so we can load the core and the WASM, right? And then we can transcode it here, and it's really not that difficult. So this default example is single-threaded, but there's another example here that is multi-threaded, so it's going to be way faster, but I've ran into some issues trying this out, but as you can see, it's really not that different. They're using core-mt, and they're specifying this worker here. So now transcoding the video is going to be a lot faster in the browser, but yeah, that's really it. So we're going to look into how that works. Alright, so the first thing we actually have to do is initialize FFmpeg. So I'm going to create this simple function load FFmpeg. That's going to be it. So now let's actually go to the top and I can load FFmpeg here. I can say import FFmpeg from FFmpeg. Awesome. So now we have this imported. And now when we go to our function here, we can first create the base URL. So we can go to the FFmpeg documentation. Let's just go here. And again, this way reading the docs is important because we're using Vite, so we need to use this ESM version. Easy peasy. In the future, I would actually prefer to download these files and ship them as part of the bundle because I actually don't care. It's better than doing it over the network like this. Alright, so now we can reassign our FFmpeg, so we have a global reference to it, right? No useRef here, boys. Oh my god. We can say new FFmpeg, so that's basically it. And then we can say await FFmpeg, so we can use load, and then we can pass it these things. And you can see in their example, they're using this to blob URL, which is again some helper. But in this case, I actually realized I don't need it. But again, if you encounter this problem later, then just use this to blob URL. But what I prefer to do, I'm just going to copy this over. And let me just do it like this. And I'm just going to remove this code since we don't need it. So we just need base URL to point it to this file. So now we can save this. And now we can set our state that it's loaded. So we're done loading FFmpeg. We can say loaded. Boom, that's how simple that is. Alright, so let's see if that works, but first we have to invoke this. So we can use onMount, and then let's pass it as a callback, and we can say load FFmpeg. Now when we save it, let's go back to our app. So now let me just load this, and if you go to the network tab, we can see you're going to run into this problem. So again, this is just part of live development, right? You run into this problem, you really have no idea what the problem is here, right? Because the docs actually don't explain it. But actually the reason why you run into this problem, because you need to enable some settings in the Vite config. And how do you figure this out? Well, for example, you can go to their examples and look, here they have some Vite example. So you can open this and then you can make some assumptions, right? So we can go here and then you're going to notice in their Vite config, they have this optimize dependencies. So they're excluding FFmpeg. So this is the reason why this is happening. And you can also include this server thing with the headers. And that's really trial and error sometimes, right? Because that's how you solve problems. So now let me just go over here and here's your Vite config, right? So you can open this and you can just paste it here. Cool. So let's save this and I can close this file. So now you're going to see when I go here to the network tab, you're going to see we don't run into a problem anymore. And now our state updates. That's just development for you, right? So we can see here is really interesting. So it's 9 megabytes. This is why we want to load this later, right? So this is loading our state updates and how beautiful is this, right? So let's go to the console. As you can see, let's just refresh again to see what's going on. So here we have our loading state and then it's loaded. Boom. So now it's faster than it's cached, right? All right, friends. So now we can work on converting the video. So here in our function where we get the file, now we can do whatever we want, but I want to make a convert video function which returns some data so we can download it later. But in this case, I'm just going to say const data await convert video, and we're going to pass it this file that we got. And we need to make this function async now, and above we can make this async function. So we named it convert video, and it also accepts an argument, video, which is of type file. So now we can set a state, since we started converting the video to this, and now we're going to run into a problem. So I already told you about this. We're going to go to their example. Let's go to the usage. So as you can see here, they use this helpful utility. So they use write file and they use await fetch file, which is imported from this helper fetch file. So that basically just turns this file type into a uint8 array or whatever is the name, right? Because this thing expects it, right? And let me just really show you what I mean in code, so you're going to understand it. So for example, if you say await FFmpeg write file, so now we're going to write this file in virtual memory. I think it has some file system, I don't know. And now if you press here, you're going to get this type data file data. And now if we go over to the type, we can go here to this data, so we can immediately deduce what file type it wants, and then we can reverse engineer it back how we have to convert this file, right? So this file data is uint8 array or a string, right? And then you're like, okay, then you maybe Google, how do I turn file type into a uint array, all right? That's basically why this helper exists. That's why they use it in their docs. This is what this does. And you just learn this by reading the docs, right? So this is what they use, fetch file, but you're going to run into a problem. So let me show you what that problem is. So if I go back here in this code, and just by importing it, it's going to break everything for some reason, right? So we can say import, it was fetch file, I think, from FFmpeg util. And then let's just save this, and you're going to see our app, let me just refresh, our app is actually going to crash. So now when we open the terminal, it has some problem with this import, right? Which is really weird. So it has this weird error, cannot use import statement outside a module. And again, this is the story all this time about problems with modules in JavaScript. So now you probably look for this on the internet, right? And then I found actually an issue where someone else using Vite or sveltekit, right, has this problem. And they said, okay, I have the same error, right? And I'm like, okay, someone probably gave them the answer. Do you want spoilers? Their answer is downgrading to an older version. Yes, friends, that's development. Nice. All right, so the next lesson is don't be afraid to dive into the source code. So here in their GitHub for FFmpeg Wasm, here is FFmpeg Wasm packages. So you can find their utils. Here are the utils, so you can go to the source. And then you can open this file. And search fetch file, and you can probably find it. Okay, cool. So now you can just spend a minute reading this, and then you can see, okay, here it is. We have a file type, right? So else if file instance of file. Oh, so they're using this function, read from blob or file. Okay, cool. So this file is actually defined at the top. And now you can do two things. You can either yeet their code, which really isn't a problem. You can just save it anywhere you want, or you can just implement it yourself. And now I'm actually not going to use this package. But again, let's go back to our function here. So now I'm going to create another function. I'm going to say const video data await. I'm going to name my read file, right? And then I'm going to pass it this video, right? And you can copy paste it over, but let's actually learn something. So I can say async function read file, and it accepts a file, which is of the type file, right? And then it returns a result promise uint array. Cool, and it's really not that hard, right? So we can say return new promise, resolve. So we have to do something and then resolve it. So now you're going to create the file reader. You can say new file reader, and you can hover over it and read what it does. So it basically lets you read the contents of a file, so raw buffers stored on the user's computer, etc., using file or blob. So this is what you're going to do to convert this type into a uint array, right? Or however you pronounce it. I have no idea, to be honest. So we can say file reader. So we can say onload, because it's the same thing they've done in their code. So now we can destructure the result from the file reader, and then we can just resolve it. That's it. So we can say resolve, and we can create a new uint8 array, and we can pass the result. So we can just change it into that. And it's going to complain because it has no idea what this is. So using TypeScript, we can say if result instance of array buffer, and now it's going to be cool with us. Alright, great. So now that's on load, so we can just make one for an error. So we can say file reader on error, and let's just assign an error, could not read file. That's it. So you can actually learn a lot just by copying over the code. And I don't mean like copy pasting literally, but just try to read the code and understand what's going on. It's actually not that intimidating. So now when all of this is done, we can say file reader read as array buffer, and now we can pass in the file. That's it. Boom, done. As you can see, it's really not that intimidating. It's a couple of lines of code. At the worst, you could have just copy pasted their example. Alright, so now we get this thing. So now if we log out video data, let me just go here. So now we can see we don't get any weird errors. Let's just drag our video. So now we're going to get this uint array. So this is really this raw data of our video. But let me just refresh this so I don't burn my eyes. But yeah, as you can see, it's really not that bad. Alright, so now actually this was the hardest part. Now we can just use their example. So now we can go here and we can do the FFmpeg part, which is really simple. So we can say await FFmpeg. So now we have to actually write this file to this virtual file system or whatever. We can name it input webbem, it's really not important. And we can pass it this video data, which expects this to be of a certain type, right? And now we can say FFmpeg execute, and now we can pass it the same command prompts. So we can pass it an array, so we can say we can say the name of the file, webm, and we can also name the output file. And now we can say const data await FFmpeg, so we're going to read the file. So now we can give it a name. You can name this video mp4 if you want. Or actually, it has to be the same name as you gave it here. So we're going to read this as output. And when this is done, you just reassign convert to done. All right, how cool is that? So now we can return the data as a uint array, right? That's how simple that is. All right, so let's save this file, but let's also log out some things because we actually have no idea what's going on. So we can do that easily if we go here where we initialized FFmpeg, and let's just make some space. So you have two options here. We're going to use on, and then you can pass log or progress. We're going to use progress in a bit to show the progress, right? But let me just first show you log, so we can the structure message. Again, this is in their docs. I didn't make this up, right? We can say console message. And let me actually just show you this. So if you go to FFmpeg, in their example, here is a log somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, here they use log. So you can see you can output this however you want. All right, but let's actually collapse this. I'm going to refresh everything. So now let's see what happens when we drag in a video. So now this is loaded, boom. And now you can see this really looks the same as your terminal output, but you actually have no idea what's going on right when you look at this like that because it really has no progress indicator. And that's why I'm going to refresh this. So let's cancel that. And instead of doing that, let's use progress. And another thing you have to keep in mind when using progress, some videos might not have metadata, so you're going to get some weird issues, right? But most videos have metadata, thankfully. All right, so let's just do this again. We can say FFmpeg on, and now in this case, you can say progress. And now you can just do this. And now we can reassign our store progress. In this case, we get this event, right? So we can say event progress, cool. And now we can multiply this by 100. Let me just really show you. If I say console log event progress, awesome, cool. So now this is loaded. So now here we're going to see this is what it gets output. So we get these decimals here, and here we're going to convert the video. So this is why you're multiplied by 100. And that's how simple that is, right? And we're almost done, friends. We only need to implement a download feature. Alright, so implementing the download feature isn't anything new if you watched the previous video, but basically we just need to go here where we receive this data. So now that we have this, we can create a new function, download video, and we can pass it the data. And above here, let's just create a function. So you can say function download video, it's data of type uint array. So now we just need to create a link element. We need to assign the href of that element to some blob, right, which we received. And now we can assign the label to the link and we can download it. So let's do that. We can say const a document create element, and now we can say a ref, and now we can use this URL. If you remember our foreshadowing previously, we can say create object URL, and now we can create a new blob. We can just say new blob, which accepts an array of buffers, this thing, so we can say data buffer. And we can also give it a type. In this case, the type is going to be video mp4. Alright, so now we can give it a label by saying a download. You can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to name it video mp4. And the last thing you have to do is say a click. But I'm going to use set timeout just so we can get our confetti animation. So I'm going to say set timeout. I'm going to give it 1 second. And here I'm going to say a click. And that's it. So now we can also go here and let me just remove this console log so we can see what's going on. And now I'm going to refresh everything. Let me just drag this video so you can see loading, loaded. How beautiful is that? Boom, let's drop the video. Conversion started. So now it shouldn't take that long. As you can see, now we have state updating, so do our styles. And this should be done any second. So now we should see our confetti. And how beautiful is this, friends? So now our conversion is done. We can download the video and we can even check if it plays. So everything looks great. How awesome is this, friends? So now we can close this. And let me also show you one thing. So you might be wondering, okay, how do we change these styles? And remember here in our code, we set this data state to state here. And now one thing I didn't show you in styles, app.css, here we have these global CSS variables. So now we set this for the body as the color, the background color, and now we can use this has selector. So now based on the state, we can change those variables, right? How beautiful is this, friends? Alright, friends, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support me by becoming a patron. Thank you for watching and catch you in the next one. Peace!